draw out with my HB pencil the cup. And I'm going to mark where all the highlights are on the cup and where the shadows are, so that I know where to go with my marker, because sometimes you get really into it and you just keep making lines, and you get really into making lines, and all of a sudden you realize, oh no, that was where the highlight was supposed to be and I've already covered it up. So I'm going to start doing that. So I want the cup to be about this big. My center line. Okay, so I have my marks that go across and through the center. I could just kind of put that there as a reference, but I'll erase that later. But I've put my highlights, so I know there's like the lightest highlight that's white right here, and I don't want to put any marker there, because if I put marker there, then it's not going to have that light colored value. So I want to make sure that I don't go over that. So I'm mapping out everything. That's really important, kind of mapping out when you're working with marker. So like here, I also have a highlight. I want to make sure I don't go over that. I have a highlight on the lip of the cup right here as well. About right here is where I have this kind of darker gray, but then right here it gets really dark. And then there's a little bit of reflected, just barely right here coming in. So here's the darkest area. So I'm just going to put a few lines right there that I'll erase later, but they just kind of let me know where that is. And also all along the edge of this cup, it's not totally dark. So the lip of the cup is different, and then it's not until down here that it starts to get dark. And then also right here, so the light is coming kind of from the side, and so also this right here is in shadow on the inside of the cup, and here on the outside of the cup, right, is so as it concaves around, this is being blocked from the light, and so this side is dark. But as it concaves inside, right, this part is not able to receive any light. The light is hitting on the other side, so they're kind of opposite. You know, I'm not really drawing too hard on with the pencil, because I want to be able to erase this pencil mark later. And I also want to include my cast shadow, because this isn't a coffee cup floating in space, it's sitting on a surface, right? So I want the coffee cup to appear that it has more weight, that it's a solid mass. So I'm looking at this little shape right here. That's another thing that you want to do, is like I looked at the inside shape here to see if that felt right. And when I want to see where this shadow goes, I noticed that it makes a little triangle right there. Make sure that arc is correct. Okay, so now I'm gonna get started, and I'm just gonna go for it. Now that I've got my cup mapped out, I know where my highlights are, I know where my shadows are, right here where the darkest areas are. So I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna go for it. Alright, I want to get all the values in from the lightest to the darkest and all the in-betweens. So what I'm going to start with first is I'm going to kind of get, so I'm going to put my marker on the side, and get lighter marks. And I'm going to start out with kind of, besides the highlights, the lightest part of the cup. And then I know that I have a lot of really dark right here. Now normally this area wouldn't be totally black, but in the photo, that's the problem with working from photos. So I'd like you to work with actual still life and pick something that's real and not work from a photo if you can. Because I took this picture of this cup and I'm not a professional photographer, but even if I was, it doesn't give you the whole like actual view of what you see in real life. And so it's kind of in deeper shadow than it really was in real life. So that's why I don't like working from photos as much. So I'm kind of going in these dark spots because I know that those are dark. I know they're the darkest dark and they're almost black. So on those areas that I know are almost black, I can kind of go in there already. And the closer the lines are, the darker you get. I tend to use a lot of lines when I do cross hatching. And on this edge, I'm not really going to totally make a line, but I'm just gonna make like a couple dots just to show that that lip of the edge is there. The lip has a little bit of gray, so I'm gonna put a few lines because it's a little gray. Space those lines apart. And now I'm doing a kind of blending. Using my wrist. So I'm moving from light, from using the marker on the side, and moving the marker up a little bit more as I get darker, moving the lines closer together. And I'm bending at my wrist for this curve. I'm going to take your time on those edges. You don't want to have your marks go out off the edge or else it'll look like texture coming off. I'm feathering out that way because I created a bit of a line where I started going this way. So I'm kind of blending. This is still a little too light. It almost looks like a white cup. So I'm still going to have to make more lines into here. So if we look at and talk about the local value of this cup, the local value of it is a dark gray. The cup is a dark gray. And it has darker values in it than dark gray. It has black and it has even white in the highlights. But if we look at the actual color of the cup, we would call that the local color. And it's a dark gray. So we want it to end up looking like that. So here I'm going and feathering out a few more lines. Being careful not to go past the edge. Alright, and let's see here. For the shadow, right where the shadow meets the cup, it's really dark. And I noticed that there's actually kind of an area about here where there's this cross kind of shadow and a little bit darker here, and then it's right about there. So within the shadow we have a lot of variations as well, and then it gets lighter as it goes here, and then here it's dark again. go lighter on the cup once you do the marker, but you can go darker. So I'm kind of putting in this area a little bit lighter for now because this is a shiny object. Usually there's a really dark that goes up to the light. Kind of like a middle gray. You can see that not all highlights are the same. So this highlight is white and this highlight is kind of, actually it's got a little bluish in it, but nonetheless the value of it is lighter than over here, right? And here is really dark. And then it gets lighter right here. Keep my lines a little bit further apart from each other. So I really have to slow down and look and notice where all these little subtle changes are, and take your time with the object that you're drawing. Crossing my lines, getting some cross-hatching in over here to get that nice dark. So I'm kind of slowing down in this area because it's smaller. At its darkest, I can see my little guideline that shows me that shadow goes to about here. And that we pick up kind of like gray here, so it's kind of black in here. And then the value changes right about here. And there's that little highlight I have marked right there. Alright, and I think I'll make a few marks here to darken this area up because it's not that light. So I'm putting my marker on the side once again to get lighter lines right in here. Kind of darken that up a little bit more. Bring this shadow out. Stop every now and then and take a look. Make sure I'm going in the right direction. So I think I need to make this a little darker. Notice my marker is up and down a little bit more. I'm trying to make darker lines right here. Get this filled in. Now I'm not making it super dark all the way at the very end right here. I'm leaving a little bit light because that shadow is going to be really dark. And then it'll just get swallowed up and it'll look like one piece. So there's usually from the table on the object, there's usually the table, especially if it's lighter in color than the object itself, it will cast a highlight at the bottom of the object. So it's usually a little bit lighter, but in this photo it's not super great, and so it kind of becomes one. But if I want to make it look separate, I'll leave just the bottom of this cup, and I'm not going to make it super dark. I'm going to leave that. It's called like a cast highlight or a reflected highlight from this surface onto the surface of the cup on the very bottom. And it's usually on the bottom, oftentimes, of the object, that reflected highlight of the table onto the bottom. It had a really strong light onto the object, and so it created some really dark, shadowy areas. Okay, I think I have a little bit better of value scale now that reflects the localized color of the cup. You can tell that the cup is a dark cup. It's not a white cup, and that's really important. I'll give you a little bit of a closer. See, I think maybe darken this just a little bit. That was good. That brought out the lip a little bit because it was too light right here. And so when I darkened that just a little bit, it made the lip pop. Okay, so now we have a cup floating in space, and I'm going to start working on the shadow. You can work on the shadow simultaneously as the cup as well, which is also a really good thing to do, is bouncing around the image and not doing one part at a time is really good. So this is kind of the darkest part of my shadow. I tend to do fairly loose cross-hatching and hatching. The shadow of an object tends to be darkest closest to the object, and as the shadow moves across and away from the object, the shadow becomes lighter and lighter. Also, the edge of the shadow is more strong and defined the closer to the object it is, and as the shadow moves out and away from the object, the line starts to fade and be softer. You can see that in the picture. There's kind of like a little light area right here, I noticed. So I'll use the side of my marker right there. Putting my marker upright again. You want to take your time here, not rush too much. Because you don't want it to look like sunburst coming out and being too take away from the beauty of the cup. Sometimes the more lines you have, the more forgiving it can be. I'm going to fade it out, assuming that as I'm going away from the object, it's getting a little lighter. And I look back, I have to stop every now and then and just kind of take a look. Okay, I think I'm pretty close. Could go a little bit darker in here, so I'll probably do that. Go in a little bit, just a little bit more, just picking a different direction. I think that's about good. I think I like where that's at. I'll probably step back for a little bit, come back to it in a while, and just double check and make sure that it's where it needs to be. This area is a little bit lighter, but I kind of like how it looks. It's still coming across as a dark cup. So I might just kind of add a little bit better gradation in there. That looks a little bit better. A little bit better, more smooth transition too. And so I have my highlights, right? And I did not put this little edge here. We know that, oh, that's, an edge, but I left it because I thought sometimes it's okay to leave. You don't have to have a black line all the way around the whole edge of an object to show where it stops and ends. So I'm trying to use my shading. But, so anyway, so I have a little bit of shadow up here. So I might just lightly imply that shadow keeps going up that wall. There we go. One little minor detail I forgot. All right. And I just barely have this line. I might kind of drag like a little dot. That's good. I don't need it to be a straight all the way across. Things can kind of fade out as they go. Everything doesn't have to be in exact detail around the image. This is my focal point, and I've got the shadow in, The cup now has weight. I made values from light to dark, and I made sure that I started my drawing out with a pencil, and I mapped out those lights and darks so I knew where I could go, where I couldn't go with the marker. That's a really important thing to start out with. And I marked my shadow, and the closer the lines are, the darker you'll get. The more lines you overlap in those different kind of directions, the darker you'll get. And remember, the when the lines are spaced further apart,